Welcome back to the Tracy Take. I am Tyler here with my brother Ryan, and today we are doing my mock draft for our Mock Draft Monday series. This is my fourth one since the beginning of the new year, so really excited for it. Starting to see kind of some of the changes and some of the different patterns, so to say. And so this is going to be a unique one. I think I mixed it up a little bit, have a little bit different philosophy behind it. And so going to get into that here in a second, but just to point out, we are recording this before the Super Bowl, so I will make my prediction now, and you can make fun of me if I am completely wrong. I do think the Chiefs are going to win. I think it's going to be a 28-24 victory. Patrick Mahomes is going to lead a fourth quarter winning drive. So we'll have to see if that happens. But before we get into the mock draft as well, Ryan and I, this entire week, we are going to be prepping for our 7-round mock draft series. We have other videos that are going to be coming out, going to be team-specific this week, such as the Chicago Bears. What are they going to do with the first overall pick? So be sure to check out that video. But for the 7-round mock draft series, it's our first of 2, and we just did our first 3-round mock draft series. So be sure to subscribe, like this video, and also ring the bell to get notified when your team's 3-round or 7-round mock draft comes out. So, Ryan, that being said, let's pull it up here. So we use PFF for this, and if you've seen our Bears mock draft video, or I think we've been saying it a couple other times as well, though, but I think until said otherwise, just for the purpose, I think, of doing these mock drafts, and just as of right now, it just makes a lot of sense for us that the Bears are looking to trade Chicago. They can go get a second-round pick. Sorry. Trade Justin Fields. Sorry. They can go and get a second-round pick for him, and they don't have a second-round pick currently. They'll also get additional draft capital as well with this trade. Also, as well, I think Justin Fields is getting closer to his ceiling, while Caleb Williams' ceiling is significantly higher already. He's going to be much more affordable for the next 5 years than what Justin Fields will be in about a year or two. So I think they're going to reset it. It just makes a lot of sense. I'm going to go with Caleb Williams here. Same thing now also then, too, with Washington Commanders. I'm going to go with Drake May in this situation. Another thing also, too, is kind of really until otherwise, we have kind of Caleb Williams as our number 1 and Drake May as our number 2. So I also think, too, the hiring of Cliff Kingsbury, I think he's going to want either one. Potentially also, too, I could see Cliff Kingsbury being like, hey, let's trade up and go get Caleb Williams, because I really kind of like what this guy can do. And I also think he can kind of really fit that tool set as well. So at 3, Ryan, you're a Patriots fan. There's a lot of different ways I think the Patriots could go here. In this mock draft, I kind of still went with the route that they're going to go with QB, reset that market. Also going to go with Jaden Daniels here. And while you're at it, if it plays on this scenario, I know some people on our Cardinals 3-round mock draft have talked about how taking a receiver here would be a waste of the pick. They have to trade back. I don't know what team would want to trade up to number 4 now with these picks right here. Maybe a team would give something up for Marvin Harrison. Well, a lot of teams would give up something for Marvin Harrison Jr. But I think you go look at it, it's like Marvin Harrison Jr. still is, I think, the best receiver in this class. And maybe it's early to take a receiver at number 4 just in general, but it's Marvin Harrison Jr. We've all seen this tape. We've seen what he's done for a couple of years now. You pair him up with Kyler Murray in that offense, and man, I think they can make some magic. So I'm going to go with Marvin Harrison Jr. here. Mm-hmm. This is my first kind of switch up. I think just to try and be a little bit different, because team also does need receiver as well, the Los Angeles Chargers. Instead of just going with Brock Bowers here and not Malik Neighbors, I'm actually going to go with Rome Odunze here. I think Jim Harbaugh also, he had to watch a lot of film. Leading up to national championship, so he watched Rome Odunze, watched how he works. I also think, too, I just really like Rome Odunze in general. He's extremely efficient route runner. He's one of the most polished receivers, I would think, coming into this class. If it wasn't for Harrison Jr. or Neighbors, like Rome Odunze, I think would still be a top 10 pick and probably the number 1 receiver in a lot of draft classes, especially the past couple. I would think. So they only have, I think, on their depth chart past this 2024 season, Quentin Johnson and Mike Williams. So I think they could also go receiver here. I also think, too, this definitely is in the realm of possibility outside going Brock Bowers. If they went with Brock Bowers here, absolutely love that pick. I also think, too, if a couple of QBs fall, this is going to be a very obvious also potential trade back position as well for a team like Atlanta or shoot, even maybe a team outside the top 10 who maybe wants to go and get a Jaden Daniels. So
Mhm.
here at number 6, the Giants, Malik Neighbors all the way. I think that they love this scenario here. If it goes Malik Neighbors to the Chargers, very well that they could go Roma Dunze here as well. So I'm more and more, Ryan, that you and I have talked about it, the more and more I think that you're right. I think that they will go away from the tackle position here. I'd probably go with a skill position player, even if it is somebody like Brock Bowers, if we're being
Yeah.
completely honest.
It's just hard to see them, like, they invested in Andrew Thomas, they invested in Evan Neal. I know those picks haven't worked out the way that they would have hoped so far. Like, Andrew Thomas is good, but the injuries last year kind of kept him off the field and whatnot. But it's just hard to imagine them going away from them so early on. And again, I know Giants fans are very unhappy, but when you think about it in terms of like an investment, if your investments are doing, like, you invest a really high asset into them and then you sell like as soon as it tanks, like, you're losing. Like, that is a loss. So I think they want to kind of see if they can right the ship with those investments.
I also think too, and Giants fans, if you're still listening with us and you haven't tuned out for us saying that these guys don't know what they're talking about. If we're being completely fair to Daniel Jones and this offense, like what they did in 2022 with very little receiving skill set and still no offensive line, I think is something to be said. They started off slow, and then they had a bunch of injuries. It was Saquon got hurt, then Daniel Jones obviously then got hurt, was in and out of the lineup. I think it was just an extremely dysfunctional year for actually all New Jersey teams, if we're being completely frank. But I think that they're still going to keep riding it out just for one more year with them. And I think, too, if you give them a legit weapon like Malik Neighbors, I think that could absolutely change the overall dynamic of this offense and maybe even help out a little bit of pressure on the offensive line because teams can't just load up the box anymore. Moving on, though, to Tennessee. This pick is, say the same. It just makes too much sense. I could maybe convince myself that they'll go with Brock Bowers here, but I'm actually going to go with Joe Alt again. It's just, I don't know. You said it first. I initially I think Olu's more of the freak athlete, but then it's like you were Joe all the way, and then after watching more and more of him, you're like, yeah, Joe Alt's just a stud. And,
he just does everything well.
And if now Will Levis is the face of the franchise now moving forward. It seems like they're moving on from Tannehill and also Derrick Henry. Well, most likely, but you're going to want to protect him. I mean, Levis couldn't even play in the last game of the year because he just got absolutely destroyed by Jacksonville and had a high. Several couple or a very serious high ankle sprain that could have been a lot worse. So here with Atlanta, I am a Falcons fan, if you can figure it out by now. And the team knows that they need another receiver. But I think the drafting of Raheem Morris and his overall defensive mindset, this is actually going to be the first time I draft a defensive player here with the Falcons. So I am actually going to go with Dallas Turner. Out of Alabama. You and I, we go back and forth. Dallas Turner, to me, almost seems like the more modern day outside linebacker. And Jared Verse is more that traditional, it seems like almost that 4-down lineman type defensive end. And so both are very good. Both are very skilled set. I'm probably going to lean a little bit more towards Dallas Turner with his overall just freak athletic traits. And there's also been a decent history of edge rushers coming out of Alabama. I don't really like that analogy, but I just say that because Will Anderson came out and Dallas Turner was compared a lot to Will Anderson, and Will Anderson just won Defensive Rookie of the Year. So, moving though on now to the Chicago Bears. So they just drafted Caleb Williams here. All the top receivers are off the board. I think it's too early for Brian Thomas Jr. and Troy Franklin, to be honest. I think Brock Bowers could be interesting here, but you do still have Cole Kmet. And I think with how deep the receiving class is in general, you're going to get round 2 draft capital for sure with the trade of Justin Fields. So you can go get a receiver in the second round. I'm going to have them focus on the defensive side of the ball here as well and go with an edge rusher, Jared Verse. I can easily see these past 2 picks being reversed, to be completely honest. But just beefing up that the defensive line even more. I know they traded for Montez Sweat, but they needed to improve a little bit more in the pass rush. I think they were one of the lower teams in the sack category. and actually overall last year. Now, that was with a slower start. I think you go get a guy like Jared Verse, absolutely polished. You put him across from Montez Sweat. It'll also take a little bit of pressure off of the younger secondary that Chicago has that they're still going to be rebuilding. So here at number 10, I actually thought very long and hard about maybe killing two birds with one stone with Brock Bowers here for the New York Jets. But I just couldn't get myself to pull the trigger. So this is where I do have Olu coming off the board. It just makes it's a great pick. This is still a perfect situation for New York Jets. I was maybe seeing if I was overthinking it at all. And I think that they'll just go tackle here. But just to shore up Aaron Rodgers' protection, but also in the future quarterback's protection as well. So moving on now to number 11 and the Minnesota Vikings. I have Leatu Latu coming off the board here. Probably one of the higher versions, I think, of Leatu Latu that I've had him draft. But the dude is probably the most NFL-ready edge rusher as of right now, just with how polished he was. And I think he's not the first taken overall just because of his a little bit of injury history. This might be a little too high for him. But if you're looking at a team like Minnesota, I think I've gone Jersey Newton here. I think I've gone multiple secondary people. So I try to mix it up, go with edge rusher. They just need anything and everything defense. And just as PFF says here, defensive line, linebacker, and DB. Yeah, that sounds about right. So here at number 12, this is where I do have Brock Bowers coming off the board. I think helps out with the offensive line just a little bit. I also think, too, if they're going to stick with Russell Wilson, it's going to give him a reliable tight end option and arguably could become their number one pass catcher, I think. So, and at the same time, too, I think it's going to help out a lot in the running game. They were not one of the best running teams last year. So they go and get a guy like Brock Bowers. They get better run blocking, better pass blocking if he doesn't want to go out for a route. But you most likely are going to want him to go out for a route, and he's got that middle of the field covered. And Russell Wilson, Cortland Sutton started to develop a connection a little bit. Jerry Jeudy started to get a little bit better here. You did go and draft Marvin Mims, who's going to be that speedster guy. Russell Wilson's probably not going to be there, but either way, this is still going to be a great option, I think, for whichever quarterback is going to be the one that is going to be starting for the Broncos in 2024. So here at 13, I had to go with Jersey Newton here. This was something I think that we had talked about that maybe you point out to me. It just makes a lot of sense. Both Bilal Nichols and John Jenkins, I think is his name. Their starting defense tackles are both free agents right now. I'm just imagining then what it would look like with Max Crosby on one side and then the
Tyree Wilson.
Yeah, Tyree Wilson, and then there's another guy. I'm blanking on his name right
I am too.
Now. Malcolm Kuntz. Sorry.
Okay.
Malcolm Kuntz. And then you put Jersey Newton in the middle of that. I think that's going to be a pass rush for days. And if you're going to be going up against Patrick Mahomes twice, going to be going up against Justin Herbert twice, and then Denver twice also, you're going to want to have a stout defensive line that can go and create a lot of pressure. They absolutely could go secondary here. I really like this Jersey Newton pick overall because, to be completely honest, I'm actually kind of satisfied overall with the Raiders' offense, just like from an outsider's perspective here. They have a couple of offensive linemen that are free agents. Actually, a lot of offensive linemen are free agents here. So, but weapons-wise, I actually like Aiden O'Connell. I think you can just kind of keep building him. And so I think if you beef up and solidify the defensive interior to go along with Max Crosby and Malcolm Kuntz and Tyree Wilson, it's going to take a lot of pressure off the secondary that is going to need some improvement here in this draft also. So moving on, though, now to the New Orleans Saints. I have to go with J.C. Latham here. I will say I think I picked offensive line every single time for the Saints here, and it's kind of hard for me to I'll say just get off that pick just because they have four, I think, starting offensive linemen that are free agents, 5 or 6 overall, so to say. The offensive line was one of the worst in the league last year, so I think we're talking about resetting the clock. I think this is a perfect guy to redo it. Might need still a little bit of development, so to say, but in general, though, just an athletic freak that I think just give him some time, he's going to develop into the right kind of guy. So this one, I'm curious on what Colts fans think of this. I think I've done this before, but maybe controversial here. But I actually have them going with a receiver, have them going with Brian Thomas Jr. I just don't think Alec Pierce is providing enough for you. And if you go look at Anthony Richardson's arm, and you go look at the setup that you have right now with Michael Pittman, I'm assuming that they re-sign Michael Pittman. If they don't re-sign Michael Pittman, then this is actually more likely of a receiver spot here. But now you have Michael Pittman, your X. You have Josh Down, your slot, and then Alec Pierce is the guy on the other side of the ball. But I just don't think he's just providing enough right now. I've seen him have some key drops. You go look at a guy like Brian Thomas Jr., who I think is more athletic, who's quicker. I think he even has maybe a little bit more developed route tree. I think he's going to provide a much more immediate impact. And then you go put Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor in the backfield. And the Colts have one of the top offensive lines in the league as well. So I actually really like this fit. But that being said, though, too, they could also take the top corner off the board as well. Whether that be Cooper DeJean, Nate Wiggins, Kool-Aid, Quinion Mitchell is a name that has really popped up. And so we're going to hear his name here in a little bit. So last pick before I want to take a little break, get a sip of water, but also want to hear your thoughts as well. So here with the Seattle, this is, I think, the first time I have this player coming in. He's rising in hot. I will say he was probably the best player at the Senior Bowl. And for a team that really struggles in the interior of the offensive line, I have him going with JPJ, Jackson Powers Johnson. I don't think that this is too early for him now. I think at worst he's a early second-round pick. And that means for Seattle, he's not going to be there by the second round. And if there's a clear weakness for this team, it's going to be on the interior on both sides of the ball. I think you can make an argument if Jersey Newton falls, or maybe if they would want to go with Byron Murphy and focus on the defensive interior. I think they can do that. But at the same time, though, this team also over the past couple of years, they have gone with like best player available. And I look at who are going to be the guys that can help impact them now. You can put an argument that Jackson Powers Johnson is a top 20 player in this draft now. Mm-hmm. And I think he immediately also comes in and he can play center, but he can also go and play guard as well and provides immediate impact. When you got guys like Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet in the backfield, you want to be able to run the ball so much better. And they were one of the worst running teams last year because they had no offensive line to block them. I like their tackles, but I think here, if you go get JPJ, really starts to solidify that interior.
Yeah. I really like that pick. I think him at the Senior Bowl, I think he really solidified himself as just one of the top offensive line prospects in the class. I think in terms of talent and technique and just overall skill, he's up there with the tackles. I will say the interior offensive line position to me, I think isn't quite as valuable. But if you can go and get a guy, you have Abraham Lucas, you have Charles Cross, go get the centerpiece of that offensive line. And yeah, you'd be set for a long time, I think, for that O-line, for whoever's back there, whether it's Geno Smith, Drew Lock, or they go and get somebody, a developmental piece in the second or third round. So I really like that one. Just to kind of go back through some of the picks, I like the Brian Thomas Jr. pick. I would go cornerback, but again, this is going to be kind of the similar theme with, I think, a lot of picks in this draft. It's like there's like 4 or 5 picks I think that would make sense because there's so many talented players and a lot of these teams have a lot of needs. So I like that one. JC Latham, I like the tackle spot. I prefer Fulaga. JC Latham to me, I think, has the higher ceiling just in his youth and like physical traits. But Talise Fulaga right now is a plug and play starter for me. I like the Jersey Newton pick. That defensive line would be extremely formidable. Getting Brock Bowers at 12 is great value. Laiatu Latu had a great Senior Bowl, and I think he really kind of solidified himself with those top 3 edge rushers. Olu to the Jets makes a ton of sense. Jared Verse, Dallas Turner. Those picks both make a ton of sense. Joe Alt to me is probably the best tackle prospect we've seen since Penei Sewell, and I think it's a coin toss between those two. And yeah, Penei Sewell was one of the best tackle prospects we've ever seen. And then before that, you got 3 quarterbacks and 3 wide receivers. And frankly, like I really could see it falling this way. I think Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, those are like the 3 top picks that I think everybody is forecasting at the moment. I will say I heard an interesting thing about the Cliff Kingsbury offense and how they need a quarterback with elite mobility. I could see Jaden Daniels potentially being a better fit in that Cliff Kingsbury offense than Drake May, just because of his elite athleticism and elusiveness, similar to Kyler Murray, but a 6'4" version. So I think that's an interesting thing to watch there. But again, for now, I think Drake May is the better prospect for the NFL, just excluding system right now, and I agree with him being there at 2. So I really like it so far. If you're ready, let's get into pick 17.
I like it. Yeah. At 17, Jacksonville. I think with the way this board has fallen, though, they need a lot of help on the defensive side of the ball. They had one of the worst pass defensive teams last year. So I haven't taken the top corner off the board. It is to me. I went with Nate Wiggins. It easily could have been Cooper DeJean. It could have been Kool-Aid or Quinton Mitchell or Terry Arnold. So, but I had them go with Nate Wiggins here. And so, moving on though now to Cincinnati. Cincinnati always needs offensive line help. I have them going with your boy Talise Fuaga here. I think this is a perfect spot for him. At 19, just in general, the Rams, they just need anything and everything offensive line. So going with the guy of Cooper DeJean, really helping out with that secondary, because you can start him out outside. He maybe can move into nickel, but he'll probably end up being a strong safety, I would think. And the dude's just freakishly athletic. So I will say with the emergence of Quinton Mitchell, I'd be curious to kind of see how Cooper DeJean does if his value falls a little bit. Same thing then also too with Kool-Aid and Terry Arnold. So here at Pittsburgh Steelers pick, I'll preface this now. Looking at this pick, I decided not to change anything just because I did this before and just to keep everything consistent. But I want to hear this from Steelers fans because on a 3-round mock draft, I agree completely that they need to have either center or tackle. And one of the things I don't like about this pick is I did the pick of what I would want to do here in this pick, just because they also have a lot of defensive tackles that are either moving on or are hitting free agency. So I did end up going with Byron Murphy, who also had an amazing Senior Bowl as well. I think he's a great player. I think this is someone who the Steelers could potentially take, but I don't know if I like this pick at all, especially too with Amarius Mims sitting there as well. That's probably the route that I would look back now. But I want to hear your guys' comments as well. So leave a comment. If you're still with us, subscribe also and ring the bell to get notified when we release more mock drafts. But with the Byron Murphy pick, I love the player. I think he's going to be a first-round pick. I just don't think the Steelers are going to go that route. Also, too, in the entirety of this channel, they've only gone with offensive players in the first round. So starting off with Najee Harris, then Kenny Pickett, then Broderick Jones last year. I don't think that that's going to change in general, and that's why I look at this pick. I would want them to do this to solidify that interior, and that TJ Watt has more and more one-on-ones. But I think what they probably will do, and another thing that they should do, is focus on the tackle position or the offensive line as a whole. So now with Miami, a team that needs to focus on the offensive line, I have them going with Troy Fautanu here. And so I think this is a guy, I have him as an offensive line, not even offensive tackle, because it's what you've talked about a lot. He can move around a little bit. I think that's why he's bumped up a little bit on Miami's board. He's also very athletic as well, and I think in that system that needs to go horizontally and also vertical as well. Offensive linemen are going to have to be shifty and quick. Graham Barton, I think, also could be an interesting one here. I think he could fit that bill as well. So sitting here at 22 with Philadelphia, I think the fact that Kool-Aid McKinstry fell all the way to him to one of the worst pass defensive teams in the league, I think he's going to help out a lot. This is a guy I think also too, and I've been seeing some commentary as well. And another guy that also could be versatile, potentially could move to safety. If he does move to safety, that's even going to help out a lot with Philadelphia because they need all the safety help as well. Just secondary in general, really outside of Darius Slay. So
one of sorry not to cut you off, but one of the things I really like about Kool-Aid McKinstry that I think Eagles fans would really like is his ability to play in multiple schemes. So if you watch him on tape, he goes from kind of being on an island with like outside wide receivers to dropping back and kind of a cover 3 or maybe like a quarters coverage where he's covering a deep third or in like a deep zone. And like he kind of plays everything in between. He's not afraid to stick his nose in against the run. He's, to me, like the most plug and play corner in this draft. I don't think he quite has like the true raw athleticism of Nate Wiggins, who might have like a higher ceiling. But if you need a guy to come in and play right away, Kool-Aid McKinstry is your guy.
Yeah.
So,
I think any secondary that they take here is going to play right away in Philadelphia. So moving on to the Texans, let's go back-to-back Alabama corners here. I think a guy like Terry Arnold, I think he'll solidify this young secondary, and I think if you're a guy like D'Amico Ryan's a defensive-minded guy, we saw what he did with his defense last year. I think they need just a little bit more kind of weapons in the secondary to help out. And a guy like Terry Arnold, you can make an argument he probably has the highest ceiling of all these corners. He's just a little bit on the younger side. And so, but I think with that little bit more development as well, put him under a guy like D'Amico Ryan's, I think that's going to be a just phenomenal selection for them. They could go receiver here. I also could see, especially the two with the Senior Bowl, if a guy like Byron Murphy falls, I could see them actually going with him there, beefing up that interior. Maybe even a Tavondre Sweat as well, if they really. I know he's more specific. He's more of a nose tackle, but he's a very athletic 360 pounds. So maybe that's early for a first-round pick, but I think just in general, what I mean by that is just defensive interior as a whole. Also, too, linebacker position as well. Edgerrin Cooper is also extremely good. So moving on to Dallas, and man, Dallas could honestly, I think, go anywhere. I think it's going to be very unique how they look at the defense with Dan Quinn gone now, because he was the one that's definitely overseeing that. They do have, is it Tyron Smith or Tyler Smith is the left tackle? Tyron Smith.
Smith. They also have Tyler Smith.
No, I know.
Left guard. Yeah.
I always got that mixed up. But Tyron Smith is a free agent. And so I ended up looking at, and I think just in general, just it's always good just to have athletic linemen, especially from Georgia. So I'm going to go with the Marius Mims here. I think super raw, super big, and just freakishly athletic. So I think there's absolutely you just give him some time, even if maybe he is like a swing tackle, but just give him some reps overall, and he'll develop into that starting left tackle for the Dallas Cowboys. So sitting here now with Green Bay, if there's one thing I really think that Green Bay needs to focus on, it's receivers. So no, I'm just joking. It's the secondary, the people that guard receivers. And a guy like Quinton Mitchell here, I think the Senior Bowl helped out his draft stock tremendously. And with the other top corners off the board, he's now the fifth corner taken off the board. I still think that this is going to be a go for Green Bay. Go get this guy here, put him across from Jair Alexander. Just really like him overall as a player. Looking forward to seeing him at the combine and how he just kind of squares up against some of these other secondary guys. With Tampa Bay here, Mike Evans is most likely going to be staying in Tampa Bay. That being said, they do need to prepare for life after him. And also, too, Chris Godwin is not the same receiver. He had a good year. I think he had 1,000 yards still. But he had a really good year. But he is also getting a little up there in age as well. So they need to prepare for him outside, prepare for both those guys after them, so to say. And also, too, outside of that, I mean, they have Trey Palmer, yes, but outside of that, they don't really have anybody that is super scary in general. This is where I have Troy Franklin coming off the board here. I think he is actually kind of a similar skill set between both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So I think he'd be a good complement to both of them. Trey Palmer is going to be their speedster. So I think you can kind of build him and have him get some good reps. Also have to learn it behind the future Hall of Famer Mike Evans as well. I think it's going to be great for him and just overall in that system, especially, too, if they sign Baker to a longer-term contract, which I think they should. I think he'd be a perfect guy as well for Baker Mayfield to lean on. So wrapping this up here now, Arizona Cardinals going with their second pick here. I think one of the key reasons why I'm on board for them going with Marvin Harrison Jr. first overall is because you can go and get a great offensive lineman still just with the way that this draft class is later on. So I have them going with that gentleman right there, Tyler Guyton at Oklahoma. Another guy had a great Senior Bowl as well, really started to rise up. And it's because of this, too, I think some teams as well, with how much both the linemen, both offensive and defensive linemen, improved a lot. I think they now have a little bit more faith that there's going to be some receiving weapons in the second round for them. So that I think a team like like Dallas or even Miami or Arizona, there's some of these other teams who might need offensive linemen or might need some other weapons as well. I think and trust like, okay, we can still go get a good second round wide receiver. So they're going to go with some of these other offensive linemen or other receivers elsewhere with the type of talent that they can go and find here at the end of the first round. So Here with Buffalo on our mock draft, we did not. I don't believe that we draft a wide receiver to Buffalo in our 3-round mock draft, and we heard a lot about that. I think it's going to be interesting what they end up doing with Gabe Davis. He was not costing too much on their overall cap space. He's come off their rookie deal. So how much is he going to go for? Do they want to keep him as well? What type of receiver do they want to place him with? And so here I did end up going with the receiver, just kind of see it out. And the way that this board has fallen, there is still a guy, A.D. Mitchell, right there. I think that he would be a great fit. I like him more than Keon Coleman. And if we go look at some of the other receivers as well, he is kind of that other big X receiver, as we like to call it. I like Ladd McConkey. I did like Tez Walker, but he just did not have an overall good showing, so to say, in the Senior Bowl. I think some other guys are good second-round developmental pieces, but I think here A.D. Mitchell is one of the last few, I think, pure first-round talents. I think outside, honestly, maybe Ladd McConkey. I think Ladd McConkey could potentially sneak in there at the end of the first round, but that's because he's going to be that shifty slot receiver that people can lean on. So wrapping up here now, Detroit Lions, a lot of different ways I think they can go here. I probably would have gone secondary if a guy like Quinton Mitchell or maybe even Terran Arnold or Kool-Aid McKinstry fell a little bit. But because of that, I ended up going a different route here. Aiden Hutchinson brings so much attention, and he's already one of the premier edge rushers. And this is a guy, I don't think I've drafted him too much in the first round, but he's just an athletic freak, and I think he's got a super high ceiling, but it's very raw still. And I'm going with Chop Robinson here out of Penn State. I think with how much that he brings to that Aiden Hutchinson brings to the table, I think that like you put a guy across from him on Chop Robinson, and then if Detroit can go and beef up that defensive interior as well, give Robinson as many like one-on-one opportunities as possible, I think he can go and win a lot of those one-on-one matchups. Because he is just super athletic. He's going to need some development, going to need some time. But at this point in the draft, a lot of teams are trying to find those diamond in the roughs. I think he can be that guy. With Baltimore here, I have them going with Graham Barton. They do have two guys that are actually both their guards are hitting free agency. Zach Zeitler, and then who is the other guy? Because I was just looking at that here. Get out of the way here. Kevin Zeitler, sorry, and John Simpson as well, and also Sam Mustipher, their backup center, is also hitting free agency as well. I think there's one thing too. They did lose Ben Powers in free agency last year. So just to help out a little bit more in the running game overall and just a little bit more pass protection, go get a guy like Graham Barton here, who is extremely athletic. He's going to kick into the interior here and could play either right or left guard. So with that being a need for both positions, I think that this would be a good pick here. I also think, too, this is a sneaky Keon Coleman pick as well. He's just the opposite of what they have right now, and he is that deep threat. We talked about it, I think, on our Detroit Lions mock draft video because we had them selecting him in the 3-rounder. So it's just something opposite that they have now currently with Zay Flowers. Also, too, OBJ's free agent, Devin Duvernay, and also Nelson Aguilar is. So receiver could be a potential option here. But I have them focusing on the offensive line and with them trusting that like we can go get some other receivers later on. So here at Kansas City, I'm going to go back to my board here as well. I've gone, I think, receiver every single time. And so just in the theme of just trying to mix this draft up here, because there's so many different ways I can see teams going, it's going to all depend on who they like. Receiver absolutely could be an option here. I do really like Ladd McConkey. I think Ladd McConkey could – I think Patrick Mahomes would love playing with Ladd just with how shifty he is. And at least in the Senior Bowl, it looked like Ladd McConkey was always open. So I think Mahomes would like that.
He was always open at the Senior Bowl.
So at the same time, though, too, one of the things I think outside of the Chiefs needed to improve their receiving room is their offensive line. Patrick Mahomes seemed to be running for his life constantly. So I have them going with your boy Jordan Morgan here, offensive tackle. Keep building that depth. They did draft Wanya Morris last year, and I think he's super athletic. They're just going to keep developing him. I think he is their left tackle of the future. I think you go get a guy like Jordan Morgan, keep developing him, then I think that you'd be solidified at the tackle position over the next couple of years. So here at 32, we had the Niners picking here. And one of my weird, and it's very nitpicky, concern for the 49ers is just their lack of depth from their first string then to their second string. And that makes sense. They have probably in each skill position player, probably the best player at each skill position. But when those guys go down, there's not too much like the offensive system shuts down. So I think if you now I've mentioned his name a couple of times. If you go get a guy like Ladd McConkey, a guy who I think can fit into any system just because of being a slot player, he is a great route runner. He can create his own space. I think a guy like that in a Kyle Shanahan system might be unfair to the entire NFL league. And hypothetically, so to say, if a guy like Deebo Samuel does go down, Ladd McConkey could probably fill in that void a little bit at times. Not nowhere near as close to Deebo Samuel, but at least it'll allow them to play that similar type of formation and ball. I think that they're striving for what Deebo Samuel brings to the table. So I'm gonna go with Ladd McConkey here. Maybe that's a bad pick. Let me know, but that's my.
I personally like it. I think one of the things that they lack is a little bit of a safety blanket. I feel like when they're not running the ball, they're trying to push it downfield, and I think that is while they do it well 98% of the time, I do think there are times where if it's not there, they still just try to force it. And I think if you give them a safety blanket in a Ladd McConkey, I really like that. One of the things I will say, Ladd McConkey is a better athlete than I would say Wes Welker, Hunter Renfrow, like previous receivers I think that we've seen of similar stature. He's bigger than them a little bit, but he's not quite like an explosive athlete like a Roman Wilson. And I think that's another route that they could potentially go over the middle and kind of have Roman Wilson there. But again, I really like this pick. I think if you give Brock Purdy a safety blanket, that would be a great fit.
Well, and that's another thing too, because with this team, I could honestly, if I didn't go with Graham Barton to the Ravens, because I try and go pick by pick and not be like, oh, I'd love if Graham Barton went here, so let's try and make that work. I try and go pick by that. I try and be like, what would the team do? What would the team think? That's why I don't like the Byron Murphy pick, because looking back on it, that was solely just like if they got Byron Murphy here, like, and so know, I don't think Pittsburgh would do that. But to your point though, if you go look at the 49ers skill position players, and that's why it's such a weird they're so good. I'm being so nitpicky, but it's like when McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, and Trent Williams all went down, yes, it was their 3-star players, but they were a shell of themselves. Because really, Brandon Ayuk is a great receiver, but he's not good enough to carry that team. Same thing also then too with George Kittle as well. So having just those other weapons, like those other guys that Brock Purdy could rely on, or they still have some sort of like semblance of the type of offensive system that they want to run. Mm-hmm. I think McConkey could go and do that.
No, definitely. And to me, he is pretty scheme averse. Like he's not gonna every scheme is gonna have a slot receiver
and a receiver who can constantly get open.
Yeah, exactly.
He's gonna find a system that works for him.
Yeah. So let's quickly. I want to run through these really quick just to kind of talk about some of them and go back through. So I did 1 through 16 in the middle, and then so 17 through 32. I like Nate Wiggins. I think I kind of talked about this. He has the highest ceiling, I think, of all the cornerbacks. He's just a little raw right now. Please Fuaga is my favorite of the tier 2 tackles to just kind of be a plug and play guy. He's like great hands, great feet, best run blocker in the class. Cooper DeJean, most versatile guy. Byron Murphy, maybe not the fit, but I'd love the player.
That's why, I love this. I love that pick. Yeah. But I'm thinking about it though. It's like, I don't think they're going to do that.
Yeah.
And that's what bugs me about that pick. I won't do that again.
Well, I could see them doing it because if that's the best player available, then that's the best player available. They have Alex Highsmith, TJ Watt, they invested in Keanu Benton last year in the draft. They have Cameron Hayward there in the middle as well. But I don't think that investing in Byron Murphy is necessarily a bad pick. I just think they might have other spots that they would want to invest in. For example, I think Quinion Mitchell would be a good fit down there at 25 to the Packers. So also Kool-Aid McKinstry and Terry Arnold were still on the board at that point as well, going to the Eagles and the Texans right after. So
Yeah.
After that, Troy Fautanu, I like. He can play tackle. He can play guard. And I don't know if he can play center or not. That center is a little bit more of a unique position, but I think he can come in and make that offensive line better right away. He's a good athlete. He has the length. He measured out well at the Senior Bowl. He measured at the Senior Bowl, but he didn't play. So that was a little disappointing because I would like to see him against that competition. But again, measurements were good. Quinn McKinstry, Terrion Arnold. It just depends on what flavor you like, really. Do you need the guy to come in and be able to contribute right away at a high level, or do you want a project piece that might have a little bit of a higher ceiling? Just kind of depends. Amarius Mims, great physical traits, needs some refinement there in Dallas. I think they probably bring back Tyron Smith on like a 1 or 2 year deal. He's 33, so maybe not. The wheels haven't fallen off quite yet, but definitely you want to get a succession plan ready. Quinion Mitchell had a great Senior Bowl. One of the things that I really loved was just the fact that he has the moxie of a number one corner. At the end of day 1 or day 2, I believe, he went off from the defensive sideline and pointed at Roman Wilson and said, "I want you one-on-one. Let's go right now." That's just like, I like that moxie as a corner. You want to have that personality. And then Troy Franklin, Tyler Guyton, both really solid picks there. I do have Troy Franklin falling down a little bit on my board. I just the more and more I watch him, the more and more I see Tyquan Thornton, and maybe that's just my fault as a Patriots fan of seeing these 6'2", 180-pound wide receivers like running at track speed all around the field.
Yeah.
But
I'll speak. I think to me, it's not even so much more about me not as high on Troy Franklin, or like I can honestly then see Brian Thomas Jr. falling. I think it's more teams are looking at it and be like, okay, we can go and get a guy similar, maybe just a little less good in round 2 or round 3, just with how deep this whole receiving class is, which is why I think JPJ gets pushed up, which is why I think Quinion Mitchell gets pushed up. So that's why I think this stretch here. I guess you can't see my mouse, but that stretch from like 12 to 24 to 25, I think is where it's going to be heavy interior and secondary players. Just because those are going to be the cream of the crop. Yeah, those are going to be the cream of the crop for this entire draft. That's why I think I felt more comfortable taking a receiver at 28 with the Bills, because typically with my other mock drafts, I think A.D. Mitchell has been off the board, or then it's a guy like Xavier Worthy or Xavier Leggett, who I feel are not going to be first-round talents. I think they can go get better players at that pick, so to say, instead of reaching for a receiver in the first round. I don't think A.D. Mitchell in the first round is a serious stretch. I also don't think that the Bills I believe that A.D. Mitchell would be a phenomenal complement to that Bills offense. And so with the obviously Stephon Diggs, but then the rise of Khalil Shakur and then adding Dalton Kincaid in there, that seems now to be that traditional 4 pass catcher set, so to say, that we're now seeing a lot of these teams try and develop.
Yeah. And I like that pick as well. I know I like that pick as a Patriots fan. That made me kind of sad to see. So we go back one. Tyler Guyton, super athletic offensive tackle. He was a former tight end and then made the switch over to tackle. So he has great feet, moves really, really well. Most likely is going to be a right tackle at the next level. So Paris Johnson will kick over to left tackle. And
I think it was DJ Humphries, if I'm not mistaken, towards ACL. On New Year's.
Yeah, and so I like that fit. I think they have a great athletic tackle there to develop. Chop Robinson, I really like. I had him in the middle of the second round, and then I think the more that this draft process has gone on, I think edge rushers are going to have a slight premium, just because I think after that second round, you're really not going to get any that are going to come in and make a difference. And so I think teams would be more willing to take an edge rusher in the first couple rounds over a receiver, just because this receiver class is going to go into the 4th, 5th round where you're going to get guys that can contribute. Where this edge rusher class after Adisa Isaac from Penn State, it's like, okay, you're going with Gabriel Murphy from UCLA at the end of the 3rd. Like there's just not a whole lot of guys. And I know Darius Robinson from Missouri, had a good Senior Bowl, and he's rising up the board. But again, I just think there's going to be a premium because there's just not as many of them in this class. So then the 2 tackles, Graham Barton, Jordan Morgan, like both of those guys, they have some position versatility there as well. Both those teams need offensive linemen. And then Lad McConkey, we kind of already talked about. So all in all, Tyler, I think this was a fantastic mock draft. Any final thoughts?
No, I think once again, I mean, we'll be saying this. I'm looking forward to the combine so things can maybe get a little more solidified because I'm getting tired of saying it, but I'm also makes me really happy to see like anything can happen come April, just because there's so many guys. I had Nate Wiggins go 17 to Jacksonville. Shoot, maybe Quinton Mitchell's the first cornerback taken off the board.
Yeah.
Maybe he even rises. Maybe the Raiders want to take him or something like that. Maybe even like I know Atlanta, just for example, talking about getting like another like a guy opposite of AJ Terrell. Don't think Jeff Okudah is going to come back. Clark Phillips had an amazing rookie year in that second half when he started to get a lot more playing time. So maybe if they wanted to bring in a guy like have Clark Phillips be the nickel guy. I'm just throwing out a random situation here. If you're still watching the video, be sure to make fun of me for that. But I think there's so many different routes that they can go into. Also, then too, to your point, another reason too why I'm more and more thinking about Atlanta taking an edge rusher at 8 is based on what you said earlier. Is like there is a big drop off after like those first 50, 60 picks. There's not really too many other guys until day 3, and like middle day 3, so to say, which is random. So I think that is going to push guys up there. So how are teams going to value that overall in all positions? Not just edge rusher. So I think it's going to be a phenomenal draft. One of the more exciting ones, I think, that we're going to cover.
Oh, for sure. I'm really excited to see what all happens because I think even like starting with the Patriots at 3, they could trade back. They could take a quarterback. They could take a wide receiver. They could take a tackle. Like there's so many things that they could do. And then depending on what they do, I think it's just going to be this domino effect of what happens in the top 10. And it's going to be really interesting to watch. I'm looking forward to it. Let's go ahead and wrap up this mock draft here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. It is the best way to help out the channel. It doesn't cost you a penny. While you're down there, go ahead and leave a comment on what you thought of Tyler's mock draft. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let us know what we should do differently next time. Other than that, we will see you guys next time.